PlayStation. They've always had their fair share of platforming mascot characters to keep me entertained over the years, on the PS2 especially with the big first-party trio in the form of Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, and Sly Cooper. And then when the PS3 launched, two of the studios behind two of those franchises went on to create other things like Infamous and Uncharted. And Insomniac initially went in that direction too with Resistance, but it also brought us a myriad of Ratchet and Clank games. I remember when I first saw this advertisement for Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction and thought it looked amazing. I mean, this is exactly what I wanted. But in terms of new IPs, well, this Little Big Planet game kind of took my interest. A cute little platforming game made up of various bits and bobs where you play as a little customizable sack person and have the ability to make basically anything you want from scratch. Yeah, that sounded like my kind of thing, to be honest. I always was doodling pictures and making things as a kid, so a game that let you do that to make levels sounded like a lot of fun. Too bad at the time all I could do was sit at the sidelines like a loser without a PS3. The closest I could get to anything like a game that lets you build whatever you wanted was Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, which is a story for another day. But I did eventually get to jump in on the platforming creativity of Little Big Planet thanks to the PSP version. Man, I sunk a lot of time into this one. I definitely got my fill of the custom-built platforming levels, the excellent music, the quirky characters all made out of random household materials, as well as the sandbox of just being able to make stuff out of nothing. All of this on the go thanks to the portability of the PSP. It's all really impressive considering most of the gameplay systems from the PS3 were in place here despite being on a handheld less powerful than the PS2. It's almost like a Little Big Planet demake in that regard. I don't know, I just find that really interesting. I did eventually get a PS3 and bundled with it was this copy of Little Big Planet 2, which I enjoyed playing on my own and with my friends and messing about with those creative tools, even though I wasn't capable of making anything good. I mean, the first thing that springs to mind is a level about the troll face of all things, which, now I've mentioned it, I need to investigate whether or not that is in fact still there. Yep, here it is, my stupid level about troll faces literally being jelly. I didn't finish it or anything, but you know, there it is. Either way, this was a fun little physics sandbox to mess around with, and in the right hands there were some crazy things people could do with this. Users, for the most part, had the exact same tools to make their own levels that the developers were using themselves, all on a console with a controller in hand within the game itself. You know, there's no need to hook anything up to a PC or get too complicated. Like, even on a technical level, I just find this very impressive. Media Molecule, the studio behind it all, pretty much cemented themselves as a developer I would need to keep my eye on in the future. And after Little Big Planet 2, they went on to make Tearaway, a PS Vita exclusive 3D platformer that no one ever really talks about, which then got ported to the PS4 in a version I've yet to play despite owning for several years now. I'll put it on the list. But then Dreams happened. Now this is the big one. I can't talk about Media Molecule without at least giving this thing a mention, because I don't know if I'll ever be able to make a full video on this, so yeah. Dreams is essentially the sandbox creation suite of Little Big Planet, but in full 3D, and it also has the tools here to let you make basically anything, really. That's not even an exaggeration either. You can make games, animations, paintings, 3D sculptures, music, characters. You can even slap on a PSVR headset and do all of this in VR and make your own VR games if you wanted to. And if you're not the creative type, you have access to everything that everybody else has made, along with the stuff Media Molecule themselves made as well, so yeah, it's pretty much the ultimate creation suite. As for me, I don't know, I just tend to make whatever really. I like experimenting with the physics engine, and I like creating peaceful looking 3D scenes and then setting up a nice camera to show them off, or perhaps even some funky visual effect by just messing around with various sliders and shapes. I mean, just to prove my point, the logo that I showed at the start of this video, if I move that to one side, then yeah, the background is something I actually made in Dreams. So, why am I telling you all this? Well, it's because Little Big Planet has kind of been a pretty big thing to me over the years, now I think about it, so imagine my surprise when Sackboy, A Big Adventure, turns up, and I don't really care. I guess with the creative side of things being fulfilled with Dreams, the third entry in the Little Big Planet series releasing years ago now, and Sony already having another mascot-looking character at the helm of the PSVR and PS5, I don't know, I just kind of assumed there wasn't any way of bringing any of this back, but no, because we've got Sackboy, A Big Adventure. Yeah, this kind of just appeared out of nowhere, being announced as a launch title for the strangely elusive PS5, but it was also made available for the good old PS4, and I guess this is now a spin-off of its own series, maybe, focusing more on a 3D kind of isometric platforming, with the obvious visual comparison there being to Super Mario 3D World, which, yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I only just started playing that for the first time recently, so... And with the trailer, I didn't hate it or anything like that, but I just remember it seeming kind of average at the time. Maybe I was concerned that the change in style wouldn't work, but either way, I wasn't really that bothered about getting it at launch. My money at the time went towards Spider-Man Miles Morales, and I'm not gonna lie, that game was pretty badass, so I'm still very happy with that decision I made. But here we are, several months later, with no signs of a PS5 ever becoming a thing in this house anytime soon, and a PS4 copy of Sackboy. Yeah, I kind of felt like playing it, so I just caved in and bought it, so yeah, let's see what all the fuss is about. Ooh, we've got that fancy new PlayStation logo going on here. Looks pretty cool. And of course, we've got Sumo Digital. I haven't played a whole load of their games, but the most relevant thing they've made prior to this is definitely Little Big Planet 3, but they've also made a whole bunch of other stuff. Some standout ones from the list are a few Sonic racing games and Crackdown 3, which I didn't even realize that was them until I looked this up, but yeah, I'm one of a very small number of people that actually liked Crackdown 3. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same people making these games, of course, because this is Sumo Sheffield, which is all but one studio underneath the umbrella that is Sumo Digital, as far as I can tell according to their website. But that's me getting way off track again, because I'm supposed to be talking about Sackboy, A Big Adventure. So starting off, and the story for this one doesn't stray too far away from what Little Big Planet has done before now. In Sackboy's world, creativity and Sackfolk live together in peace.
Sorry, folks, this apparently can't last.
And then one day this giant bad-looking guy named Vex shows up, wanting to destroy the creativity of Craftworld by creating some big evil thingamajig to take over the world and generally make a mess. And for what it's worth, I'm already liking this villain. He's like a big evil version of a sack person thanks to those facial features, but I'm really digging the whole giant jester thing he has going on too. He has a big booming voice, shows up fairly frequently throughout the entire game, and pretty much steals the scene every time he does, so yeah, I'm a big fan of this guy. But anyway, like I say, his reason for doing all of this is pretty similar for the reasons the other bad guys in this franchise have had in the past, but man, does this game kill it with the visual presentation. I guess this is one of the major benefits of it no longer specifically being a Little Big Planet game, but all of the cutscenes are now fully animated and voice acted, and the work done on all of this animation is absolutely brilliant. Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking Little Big Planet, as I still really love the idea of seeing the cutscenes work out in a way that we could replicate using the Creation Suite, but when the focus is shifted away from leveling out the playing field, more of that focus can and obviously was put into making all of this look the way it does. The camera angles and direction of all of these scenes are so good, with all of these expressive faces, close-up small details. It's just a real treat to the eyes. Anyway, Sackboy is the only one to get away when he takes off in a little rocket ship and sets out to find the things Vex needs to make his big machine before he does. It's a simple enough tale for the younger folks playing to understand, but it's complex enough with its visuals and voice acting for more grown-up idiots like me playing it to enjoy as well. So, once you're at the point where you can start playing, you have a nice little introductory level teaching you some of the basic movements, and the game does a great job of gradually rolling out new ideas and even combining them later on, so while this is all new to Sackboy, it's not going to be too overwhelming to you. The controls are simple and straight to the point really, at least when you first come across them. Sackboy can move, jump, grab, slap, ground pound, and dive roll. Again, there's a lot of carryover here from his moves in his previous adventures, but that dive roll is the standout new one. If you keep using this move, it will become a really nice, quicker way of getting around levels with the risk of slightly less directional control, which, you know, that makes sense. The little guy can't exactly see what he's doing after all. But there is quite a lot of mid-button press malarkey that you can do to combine some of these moves together, which all feel really nice in execution. The main useful one that you'll be using is this little air hover thing. After jumping, you can tap and hold jump a second time to hover in the air for a quick second. This is pretty handy for making those tiny little adjustments adjustments you might need while going around, but it's not going to carry you very far, so don't count on it getting you over gaps. Every other button combination out there isn't going to blow your mind or anything like that, but it's little things like being able to dive mid-air and then continue that dive into a roll on the ground, or pressing the jump button mid-roll to do this nice little flick. I can't tell if doing this makes your jump any higher or not, but that little flip animation that Sackboy does whenever you do this just looks and feels so good, so I ended up doing this like all the time basically. I do think you're going to want to change some settings on a couple of things though, trust me on that. By default the air hover has you double tap and then hold X, which does take some getting used to but didn't feel too bad. But simply rolling around on the ground like this has you smash the circle button over and over again by default, which is so uncomfortable and genuinely distracting when you're trying to use it to get around levels quickly, especially the ones with a time limit. I could not imagine keeping that on the button press mode, so yeah, do yourself a favor and change both of these to hold, especially for rolling around on the ground. I mean, having to spam circle every time you want to do that is just ridiculous, man. But before I go any further, I am just going to say that yeah, I am probably going to bring up Little Big Planet a few more times throughout this video for little comparisons and observations I've made. I mean, this game does have the same essence and general vibes those games gave off, like how everything is made of everyday objects and how everything is just as British as it was before, but it's also kind of doing its own thing with those themes and the pure platforming focus this time around. So yeah, this isn't a Little Big Planet game, but it is set within the same world, so there is quite a lot of middle ground here for sure. Right off the bat, you'll be grabbing a bunch of those orbs that make a nice little popping sound whenever you do, and damn, I forgot how satisfying that noise is too. The way it gradually gets higher pitched the more you get, it's so good. But a new type of collectible are these little bells, which have the best name ever, being the Collectables. Yep, I really like that, and you'll use those to visit a little shop and buy new outfits or clothing pieces for your sack person. And same as before, you can mix and match these however you like, and you'll unlock more and more styles to buy as you progress through the various worlds in the game, but you can also paint items different colours, so you really can make your own style up here if you want to. At first, I did think this was a little bit of a shame that you can only do all of this in between levels though. I remember I was really indecisive and used to change Sackboy's costume multiple times during levels just for the hell of it, but yeah, you can't do that anymore. But I am a lot more decisive with this kind of stuff these days. I'll just pick one outfit that I like and stick with it, which in this game just happens to be Sackboy's default look. I can't get over how good he looks just as he is, so yeah, you'll see him looking like this a lot in my video. I did, however, eventually find a beanie to stick on him, which I thought looked really good. You know, pretty much anything looks good in a beanie, right? As for any familiar moves, well, you can grab onto sponges in order to swing around or fling yourself over gaps, which feels right and makes perfect sense really. I always thought this was fun and it doesn't really need changing, so I'm glad they didn't. And then you've got some other stuff like grappling hooks, boomerangs and jet boots joining in for level specific power-ups. Again, some of these first showed up in Little Big Planet. I think the grappling hook was like one of the big things in Little Big Planet 2, but yeah, I really like how they're used here in a variety of different ways and even in combination with one another at times. So as you work your way through the worlds and levels, you'll come across these things usually at the start of each level, with the entire stage then being an obstacle course based around what that will bring to the table. One of the earlier ones you get to use are these puddles of honey which stick you to walls, making some of the levels twist and bend around into all sorts of shapes. You can't jump when on a wall though, which does make sense, but the game does kind of get around that when it comes up again thanks to the boomerang power-up. This thing on its own does what you would expect it to do really. You know, you can press a button to throw the boomerang and it will knock out enemies and you can activate switches with it. I also really liked how in some levels you can use it to chop down plants, which themselves are supporting platforms up in the air, so you get a nice bit of interactivity with it and stuff like that. But eventually you'll come across this futuristic level where you're also given the honey puddles, and with those things combined you can throw the boomerang at teleporter pads to fly across gaps even when you're on the walls. And this sort of stuff happens all the time, and it's always fun to see how these multiple separate ideas get taught to you in their own levels, giving you the time to fully understand them and how they work, and then they'll throw a bunch of them all together. The grappling hook, for example, you can use it to swing off of things and clear gaps, but in another level you'll use these bubbles which have you jump in and out of them in quick succession, and then you'll have a level where you're doing all of that at the same time, and it just feels really good, and it often made me smile. The jet boots are probably the exception to this, I guess. I mean, I did like using them, but they're mainly just used for avoiding things that have a pattern in place, so you can go above or below certain obstacles like this one where the water is moving about from side to side. And I did start to like them even more when I found out they also have a laser laser blast, but I guess it's because these take up both of Sackboy's arms and legs. You don't really get to see this one combined with anything else. So it is good, but it didn't make me go wow in the same way that some of the other power-ups do. There is another one which I feel had a bit of potential but didn't really get used all that much, and they were these platforms that controlled separately from Sackboy. So when you stand on one of these, you can use the gyroscope in the controller to tilt it around. Sometimes you'll have free movement, and sometimes it's for these sliding block puzzles, and I don't know, I just feel like more could have been done with these, I guess. There was this one time I noticed if you jumped off of a moving platform while it's going at a fair bit of speed, you keep the momentum and friggin' launch across the screen, which I thought could have been used later on in the game, but I never came across anything like that. But I guess if things got a bit too complicated, it would defeat the all ages demographic, I'm guessing. This does seem like the kind of thing you would use to explore side objectives though, so it's a bit of a shame that that doesn't come up. As for other things, I didn't come across too many, but you can also find these hidden away items which allow you to get to different areas of levels, but not in the obvious linear way that the proper power-ups do. You've got things like this little cocktail drink umbrella, for instance. I found it here tucked away in the corner of a level, and while it didn't serve much use at first, there was an area later on down the same screen with a ledge I wouldn't have been able to access otherwise. And every level has hidden things tucked away like this. You'll often see a little area slightly out of the way, or maybe a breakable box blocking a doorway or something like that, which can lead to stacks of hidden orbs or even bonus areas. I guess these are the Sackboy equivalent of Crash's bonus levels, but these offer a variety of different platforming and timing based challenges, and if you win the challenge you'll net yourself a Dreamer Orb, which is this game's big boy collectible. You can also find these in and around the stages, hidden to the sides, inside of containers, or shattered into pieces that you'll need to find, with a little tally to help you roughly keep track of where you found them in each level. If you collect these, you'll break barriers in the Overworld, which lets you access each world's boss and eventually the next area that you need to go to, so it's all structured fairly straightforward. Speaking of which, I've got to say the Overworld here is pretty fun too. There's some things that you can break open for extra collectables. Each level has a photo of the high scorer on display, which you actually take at the end of each stage, and there's hidden routes to special areas of different worlds. This kind of reminded me of Super Mario Odyssey, I guess, like how in that game you could find a painting and it will warp you to another world, but you'll land in an area that would otherwise be completely inaccessible without finding that secret entrance. And yeah, that's basically what you have here, but for the Overworlds. It's pretty cool seeing some of the upcoming worlds that you haven't been to yet, but I really did like seeing a different perspective of the ones I have already been to. And of course, while you're here, you'll usually find an extra level or two to do, so it's not a completely meaningless journey. In fact, it's pretty good for the old wiggle room situation, as surprisingly enough, this game did actually halt me a couple of times and made me go and find more Dreamer Orbs because I couldn't break certain barriers. I don't say that in a bad way though, as I knew I had missed a few orbs in certain levels, and there's several co-op only levels that I was completely unable to play, but even then, finding the necessary amount wasn't too bad, as there is quite a lot of stuff to do in this game. I mean, for instance, you've even got these secret levels locked away behind these robot Rubik's Cubes looking collectibles that you can find in certain levels that unlock these harder stages with a much faster pace, and they were a lot of fun to play through if you combine those with a small selection of time trial levels, and yeah, you really do have to understand how some of these basic moves string together if you want to get through these. Oh yeah, and the music levels, I almost completely forgot about these. These are genuinely fantastic, and I can't even show them to you because my video will get thrown into the trash thanks to a copyright claim. So every now and then you'll get a level where the entire thing is set to the beat of a real world song, and they're all spaced out in such a way that keeps the gameplay in sync to the song at all times. And yeah, I have no idea if the team behind the audio in this game got the original music samples or just did some serious remixing work, because even if you take too long in one particular section, the beat will still keep going and sounds as normal as it does anyway. So yeah, I have no idea what they did here, but I've definitely heard them all before and thought they were a fantastic fit for this game because they make for some really good platforming levels. And with the sounds of the music levels being such a highlight in this game, I've got to talk about the visuals here too, which, yeah, I mean, graphics don't usually bother me that much. I play all of the old games on this channel after all, but in this game, I've got to take into consideration that it's also a PS5 launch title, so yeah, I'm really impressed with how well it looks on the PS4, but more importantly, how well it runs. 60 frames per second. The cutscenes, the menus, the gameplay, the logo at the start of the game, it's all 60 FPS, even on a chunky Kong original PS4 that launched in 2013. Obviously, there's going to be a bit of graphical fidelity lost here compared to the PS5, but I don't really care given how well it all runs and still looks anyway. This is the exact opposite of how I felt at the start of the 8th generation of consoles, to be honest. If you go back to the 7th gen with the PS3, you've got games like Ratchet & Clank Tools of Destruction running at 60 FPS, and then with the PS4, everything shifted to photorealism and was locked at 30 FPS. Even the cartoony games that got released were often locked at 30 FPS too, and I mean, I'm not that fussed as long as the frame rate is steady, but look at how good this game looks and running at double the frame rate. It's a shame it took literally the entire generation to reach this point again, but whatever. The main thing I love seeing is all of that Little Big Planet charm still here and completely intact. I've always liked how everything is something, you know, like how everything is just made of random stuff that you could have lying around your house, and how quirky and British everything always has been. In the past, we've had the voice of Stephen Fry telling us what's going on, and this time I boot the game up to hear Dawn French, the Vicar of Dibley herself, telling me the story. And she's an actual character that you see as well. Like, I did not expect to hear that voice coming out of that sack lady, that's for sure.
Seek out these orbs. They are the key to your journey, the key to your destiny, the key to well, you know, you get the idea.
All of this makes me so glad that Sony gave this to another British studio with Sumo Digital, as I just don't think you would get the same atmosphere otherwise. This is all so wholesome, and it really takes me back to my teenage years of enjoying Little Big Planet on my PSP. Oh man, this game is so good. I guess there is one thing that I'm not too fussed about, which is the boss fights. I'm not going to outright show you how they're done, but even if I don't, they're pretty easy to figure out anyway. I just feel like too many of them were just regular enemies on steroids. In the levels, you'll see these spinning around enemies, and then after a while, it's like, oh no, one of them is very big now, and he's the boss. Oh, okay, I guess. Going up against Vex was pretty fun at first. I mean, visually, like I say, he basically steals the show whenever he's on screen, but weirdly, you do the same kind of fight against him 3 times, and I don't really think they got harder with each one. I don't know. Maybe they did. It was a bit strange, really. He does eventually have a couple of unique styles of fight towards the end of the game, which, again, I'm not going to show you, but yeah, I don't really think it's a spoiler to assume that everything's going to end okay in this kid-friendly Little Big Planet spin-off game based on how the previous games have ended, right? I mean, you shouldn't be worried that the ending is doom and gloom, because look at him. This game's happy. But yeah, that is Sackboy, a big adventure, a game that I really liked. I think that Sumo Digital have done a great job in bringing Sackboy back into the limelight with this one, and potentially, and hopefully, setting him up for more games like this in the future. Like I say, we still have Media Molecule out there, still fulfilling that gap of a purely creative game with dreams. And I guess that's the duality of Little Big Planet. Media Molecule obviously had their eyes set on expanding that creation suite, but that left the gap for another developer to come in and create another platforming game. And instead of just bringing us more of that again, like Sumo Digital previously did with their own entry in that series, or literally just giving us pre-built levels as they were alone, they've basically helped that platforming side of the game grow beyond what it was originally and into something really quite special as far as I'm concerned. I just don't think I could see any of that when I first saw the announcement trailer. But there's still plenty of things for me to do in this game. I mean, there's an entire hidden world full of levels after you beat the main story, but I'm probably going to save all of that for another time, maybe for when I've got some friends here to play the game with, or whenever that free PS5 upgrade becomes a thing I actually need to use. But if this is truly what the Little Big Planet series is going to become from this point on, then yeah, I'm all for it, because in some instances, change is very good. And in this instance, it was good. It's a good game. Play it. Hey, welcome to the end of the video. I don't have anything specific to say today. I mean, I could plug my Patreon page, but I won't. Anyway, if you watched the entirety of this video, then thank you, and you're an absolute legend, because I spent my whole week off making this one, so yeah, thanks.